Hey guys, happy Sunday. Hope you're all doing well. I've been having a few good conversations during the week actually about sequencing within the Goju kata, how it came about, how important is it, um, and basically my thoughts on the progression and what I currently do. So it's something we spoke about a little bit before. The actual sequence of kata, from cipher all the way up to your super lempe, to my knowledge, to the best of my knowledge, never came about until after the death of Miyagi Chojun Sensei. Again, to the best of my knowledge, no one student was taught the entirety of the system, despite what might be said. My understanding is, and this has come from multiple sources as well, is that following the death of Miyagi Chojun Sensei, the senior students, i.e. Miyazato Eiichi Sensei, Yagi Meitoku, Toguchi Sensei, they got together and they basically filled in the gaps. So, as you probably know, each student had their Tokui kata, or the kata which was bestowed upon them as their research kata, their one suited to their body type, suited to their mentality, suited to their physicality, to specialise in and to make their lifetime study. Now, after the death of Miyagi Chojun Sensei, the students got together and they learned each other's Tokui kata. So I was told Miyazato Sensei was given Seisan kata, which might explain why it's presented later in the system within the Jindokan and OGKF lineages. If that was Miyazato Sensei's speciality kata, it would make sense that that was nearer the pinnacle of progression. Yagi Meitoku Sensei was bestowed Super Lempe. So, across all forms, Super Lempe is generally the top kata that you learn. So really the one that flits around is the Seisan kata. So like I say, within Jindokan lineages, it appears higher in the system. Within Toguchi lineage, I think also Meibukan, correct me if I'm wrong, Alan Sadler, you will know better than me, Seisan presented earlier on in the system, directly after Seiunshin kata. So a relatively, entry-level kata. Within my own system, again, it's taught after Seiunshin kata and it's considered a black belt kata. It's with regards to the grading system, it's what you would grade for your shodan. Now, Seisan kata, I can remember, I was really looking forward to learning it. When I was in Jindokan lineage, again, it was one of the final kata I learned, and having learned it after Kulunfa, I couldn't quite understand why it was so high in the system, because it seemed quite rudimentary, quite basic, quite, less difficult than the Sanseru, the Seipai, certainly less difficult than Kulunfa, so I couldn't understand why it was second to last. Then, when you look at other systems where it's taught after the Seiunshin kata, well, it kind of makes more sense, but even then, I would say Seisan is more a progression of your Sanchin. So if we look at Sanchin as a way of presenting body mechanics, a way of presenting ideal structures dependent upon opponent positioning, really along that sagittal plane of front onto the opponent, but we're not angling off so much as we would in other kata, it makes sense that that would be relatively early on in the system. And this is something that's replicated also within some of the southern arts, like the Southern Mantis, like the Bakmei, like the Five Ancestors Fist, where you build upon that initial Sanchin and then add layers to that. So, and then it starts to, okay, well, we take our Sanchin, now we start adding different hand movements to that same structure. Now we start adding angles to that same structure. Now we start adding multiple directions. Now we start adding weapon defenses. So each layer that you add upon that Sanchin increases the complexity and the skill level needed to apply that kata. So for me, the Seisan makes sense that it's way earlier on in the system. Now, I can remember reading back in the good old days of karate blogs before Facebook groups and, karate got boring. It was back in the days of Charles Goodin's blog. I used to really like that. Charles Goodin, based in Hawaii, he had access to some great material over there from the different karate masters who visited the islands of Hawaii back in the 1930s and even earlier. Now, within that, there was a newspaper article relating to the visit of Miyagi Chojun Sensei around 1934, whereby he was teaching different groups, and the structure that he taught in Hawaii was to introduce Seiunshin and Seisan as his training kata. Seiyunchin and Seisan, so two very different spectrums within the Goju system. So why is that? You know, and again, if we look at the cipher, now cipher's absence from this, but again, from what I was told, cipher was created by Miyagi Chojun Sensei around 1940. So this is after the trip to Hawaii, which again might change a little bit what went on. Now, if we look at Seiyunchin and Seisan, let's throw in cipher to the mix as well. So we got our Sanchin, we got our Tensho, we got our means of developing the Goju framework, the Goju engine, the chassis of our system, so that we have that structure. Now, once we've learned and digested that over that, let's say that Sanden Sanchin, the 3-year Sanchin, whereby we're training the Junbyundo, we're training the Hojundo, we're putting all the attributes into this working system of the Goju that we can then apply within a fighting style. Now, if we look at the kata as individuals' fighting styles or application principles or tactical options, what does cipher specialize in? Well, if we look at a cipher, what are we looking at doing? We're angling off, we're evading, we're outflanking the opponent, changing this Sanchin structure from being square on to being side on. So we're working laterals, we're working angles, we're working flanks. Something very different to what you're getting in your Sanchin. So no longer is it about stand there, take a beating, strongest man wins, rock'em sock'em style. Now we're talking about being a little bit more smart. Now we're talking about getting out of the way, being evasive, being elusive, being a shadow, outspeeding, outwitting the opponent. Now we look to Seiyunchin. What's Seiyunchin all about? Well, it's about holding our ground. It's about pulling towards, drawing in, off balancing, overcoming. So now we're talking less about getting out of the way. Now we're talking about bringing them into our game. We want them in. We want them close so that we can then start to disassemble them, start to take out joints, start to unbalance, throw, trip, break, whatever it is. But the Seiyunchin, again, has a very different mentality and mindset required to the cipher. With that in mind, it also has a very different set of skills and attributes required to make that work. Now, if we look at the Seisan, well, Seisan again is that Sanchin structure, but now what do we look at doing? Now we look at actually flooding the opponent. We look at taking ground, getting in on them. Once in on them, using combinations, multiple strikes, something that we don't see an awful lot of within the Goju, but within the Seisan, we use it frequently. Strings of 3 techniques, strings of 5 techniques. We start to introduce slightly longer striking patterns, which again are reminiscent of some of the Southern styles where it's about multiple strikes to the same target. So the Seisan now, we start to look at clinch work, how to break out of the clinch, what to do, almost the counter option to the Seiyunchin, whereby you're being pulled in and dragged. Well, the Seisan is what do we do if that happens to us? How do we get out of this situation? How do we attain dominance over an opponent who's trying to keep us close to them and dominate us? So if we look at those 3 kata, we have 3 very, very different skill attributes, mindset requirements, with regard to aggression levels, more passive versus more aggressive. We have a very wide spectrum of our Goju system contained within those first 3 kata. So when I'm asked about my own training, about, you know, what do I favor, how much do I practice the whole system? The answer is no, I do not. Very, very rarely do I now go beyond Seisan. The mainstay of my training is the Sanchin. I really enjoy cipher. I feel that suits my body very well. I feel there's very few people can do cipher very good, myself included. So I'll see that as a very good challenge. Cipher is very complementary to your Kulunfa kata. Now, I suck at Kulunfa because I also suck at cipher. So until my cipher is, you know, of a higher level, there's no point me even attempting the Kulunfa other than to keep the pattern fresh in my head. But I'm not going to be any good at that until I can get good at the cipher. If we look at the Seiyunchin, well, the Seiyunchin is mirrored by our Shisochin. Again, if I can't get good at Seiyunchin, there's no point me progressing to the Shisochin. Well, the Seisan, well, now obviously that relates to our Sansodu and our Suparenpe. Again, if I can't do a good Seisan, I've got no business even going towards the Sansodu and the Suparenpe. So you see there's levels. Now, the reason I say this is because the entirety of the system can be condensed within those 3 kata. So thereby you train one thing to train the many. Thereby you condense your system, you condense your time, you make it more efficient with your training. The more layers of complexity and depth of understanding and knowledge you can add to these kata, the more you get from them. So now you no longer need all this other stuff. But in some respects, you have to go get that other stuff to be able to condense it back into the few. Okay. Anyway, guys, that's just some of my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you think. Let me know how it applies to you. Okay. I'll speak to you in a week.